So, I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine you're walking into the middle of a major symphony or like an opera orchestra, right?
Okay, yeah.
And it's around, say, 1830.
Right. Prime Romantic era.
Exactly. And you look closely at the viola section, you probably expect to see these, passionate, highly specialized artists like we have today.
But you definitely wouldn't.
No, not at all. You are essentially looking at a graveyard. I mean, we're talking about a historical landscape where the middle of the string section was quite literally referred to as a haven for the infirm.
It's wild. It was the absolute definition of a musical dumping ground.
Right.
I mean, if you read the primary source accounts of the era, and for this deep dive, we are looking really heavily at Maurice W. Riley's The History of the Viola, Volume 1.
Specifically zooming in on Chapter 11.
Exactly, Chapter 11. And the language used to describe violists in those sources is just brutal.
It really is.
You were dealing with, quote-unquote, decrepit violinists.
Guys whose hands had basically failed them.
Yeah, or elderly wind players who had lost their embouchure,
Wow.
They just needed a place to sit where they wouldn't do too much damage to the overall sound of the orchestra.
Which is just crazy to think about. It totally shatters that beautiful egalitarian picture we have of the classical orchestra.
Oh, totally.
We like to think every chair is this meritocracy of sound, right? But we really have to ask why it got that bad in the first place.
And more importantly, how it got better.
Exactly. Because today, for all you Viola Studio listeners out there, we are digging deep into the 4 legendary virtuosos who completely changed the game.
We're talking Alessandro Rolla, Chrétien Urhan, Niccolò Paganini, and Hermann Ritter.
Right, the guys who just refused to accept that back row exile. They essentially turned the viola into a powerhouse solo instrument.
And they did it by experimenting with these massive, honestly biomechanically terrifying instruments.
Oh, yeah, we're talking violas reaching up to 48 centimeters.
This is almost 19 inches in length.
Which, I mean, for any professional listening to this who plays a standard 16 or 16.5-inch instrument,
it's an almost physically sickening dimension to even contemplate playing.
Just thinking about my shoulder hurts.
Right.
Welcome to Viola Studio. We are a YouTube channel dedicated to the technical, pedagogical, and artistic development of viola students and instrumentalists. In every episode, our goal is to provide a concise and entertaining analysis. We will explore key themes, the messages of the great masters, and the historical context that shaped the sound of our instrument. Whether you are taking your first steps in the alto clef, or you are a professional seeking a new perspective, there is something for everyone at Viola Studio.
Don't miss our upcoming episodes, and remember,
there's always time to explore the history and the heart of classical music.
I want you to keep the physics of the instrument at the absolute forefront of your mind.
Because it really comes down to physics, doesn't it?
It does. We are looking at an era defined by this literal battle between acoustic physics and human anatomy.
Like, how did the actual physical size of the viola dictate the repertoire that was being written for it?
Exactly. And conversely, how did the ambition of composers force the physical dimensions of the instrument to evolve?
Sometimes pushing it way past the point of human endurance?
Yeah, well past it.
Right, because if you are playing an instrument that is functionally just a small cello strapped under your chin,
you're in trouble.
Yeah, your left arm isn't just going to ache, your entire rotator cuff is in serious jeopardy.
But, to understand how we actually got to those 19-inch behemoths and how the viola survived this whole dark age of decrepit players.
We have to start the turn of the 19th century.
Right, in Italy. With a musician who did something practically unheard of at the time.
He actively chose the viola over the violin.
Yes, Alessandro Rolla.
The trailblazer.
Exactly. So he was born in Pavia in 1757, and he died in Milan in 1841.
Okay.
And Rolla's is really a foundational figure for the instrument. But to understand his impact, you kind of have to understand the specific ecosystem of Italian string playing back then.
At the end of the 18th century, right.
Right. You had this massive explosion of technical advancement for bowed instruments happening all at once.
Because violinists like Giovanni Battista Viotti were entirely revolutionizing the bow arm, right?
Yes, and cellists like Jean-Louis Duport were codifying all these new left-hand fingering systems.
So basically the violin and the cello were getting all the R&D, so to speak.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And among that great Italian string lineage, Rolla just stands completely apart.
Because he was a top-tier virtuoso himself.
Exactly. But he looked at the viola and essentially said, this is not a stepping stone for me.
Right, this is my destination.
And he absolutely had the resume to do whatever he wanted.
I mean, his background is insane. He studied under Gianandrea Fironi, right?
Yeah, the Maestro di Cappella of the Duomo in Milan.
And he was the concert master at the Venice Opera.
Right. Then in 1784, he was appointed the court solo violist in Parma.
Okay.
Then he becomes conductor of the Ducali Orchestra until 1802.
And eventually takes over as conductor of the La Scala Opera in Milan.
And he held that post until 1833.
Which is huge. La Scala being the absolute, undisputed center of the Italian operatic universe at that time.
Oh, without a doubt. And then in 1805, he's appointed solo violinist to the Viceroy of Italy, Eugene de Beauharnais.
But the really pivotal moment for our history, the big one, comes in 1807.
Yes. The Milan Conservatory of Music is founded.
Right, and Rolla is appointed its very first professor of violin and viola.
Which is a huge deal.
Well, I actually want to stop right there for a second.
Sure.
Because the title, Professor of Violin and Viola, might sound pretty standard to us today.
Right, you see that at universities all the time now.
Exactly. But what did that actually mean for the pedagogy of the time? Like, if a student walked into Rolla's studio back then, how was he teaching the viola differently than a violin?
That is the crucial distinction, honestly. Sidney Beck, who did a ton of research and edited Rolla's concerto for viola and orchestra in E-flat, up 3.
Great piece, by the way.
It really is. Well, Beck points out that Rolla realized early on that you cannot just take violin technique and transpose it down a fifth.
Because it just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. The acoustic reality of the viola is different, especially the instruments they were playing back then.
Which were often quite small, right?
Yeah, very small. And they severely lacked a resonant C string. So it required a completely distinct biomechanical approach.
Because the strings are thicker on a viola, they require more mass and slower bow speed to get the core of the sound to actually speak. Like, if you use a fast, light violin bow stroke on a thick gut C string in 1810, you aren't going to get a rich tone.
No, you're just going to get this awful surface scratch.
Right. So Rolla had to codify a completely different use of arm weight.
And furthermore, the spacing of the left hand is just wider.
Oh, for sure.
You can't rely on the same nimble, contracted hand frame that you'd use for the violin.
You have to stretch.
Yeah. So Rolla performed extensively as a soloist, and he wrote for his own instrument to basically prove a point.
To prove that the viola had its own voice.
Exactly. He wanted to show that it possessed this unique, melancholic, dark artistic voice that demanded its own dedicated study.
It wasn't just a violin being played an octave lower.
Not at all.
And he didn't just write a few practice etudes to prove this either. I mean, the sources show he composed over 400 works.
400 works. It's staggering.
That includes at least 10 full viola concertos.
Plus a massive quantity of duets, trios, and chamber music.
And specifically chamber music that featured the viola as the leading voice, which was super rare.
Extremely rare. And most of these works were actually published during his lifetime.
By major houses, right, like Arteria and Ricordi.
Yes, exactly. Which tells us something really important. There was a real commercial demand for this music.
People wanted to buy it and play it.
Right. It wasn't just sitting in a drawer in his studio.
Okay, but this is where I feel like I have to be intellectually honest and kind of challenge the narrative a bit.
Oh, for it.
You are painting Rolla as this massive savior of the instrument.
Well, he kind of was.
Right, but if he wrote 400 pieces, had them published, performed them himself at La Scala, why did they completely vanish from the repertoire after he died?
That's a fair question.
Like, was the music actually any good? Or was Rolla just this sort of pedagogical bureaucrat,
Bureaucrat.
Yeah, like a big fish in a small pond who just had a monopoly on the Milan Conservatory and basically forced his students to buy his sheet music?
Okay, that is a brutal question, but it's entirely fair. It really forces us to look at the machinery of musical fame in the 19th century. Was his music on the level of Mozart or Beethoven? No.
Okay, so it wasn't masterpiece level.
Not quite. It was firmly rooted in the early classical gallant style.
Which was probably already starting to sound a bit dated as the full Romantic era approached, right?
Exactly. But the primary reason his music vanished wasn't necessarily just a lack of quality. It was a lack of institutional momentum.
Meaning he didn't have a successor to carry the torch for him.
Yeah, think about how repertoire survives today. A piece of music requires constant living advocacy by top-tier touring soloists to stay in the public ear.
Right, it's like a modern content creator who masters a niche platform.
That's a great analogy.
But then the platform's algorithm changes after they die and their content gets buried.
Exactly. Rolla wrote these incredibly demanding concertos for himself to play. When he died, the platform algorithm of the 19th century, which was live concert programming, changed.
Because there weren't 10 other touring viola virtuosos ready to champion Rolla's concertos across Europe.
Right, so the music just disappeared from the standard rep.
But his pedagogical impact didn't disappear.
Without question, no. That is where his real legacy lies.
Because he founded what became known as the Lombardy School of String Playing.
Yes. He churned out this absolute army of highly competent, disciplined players.
We're talking names like Eugenio Cavallini, Angelo Maria Bonancore, Girolamo Biaggi.
And the absolute hallmark of a Rolla student was that they respected the viola.
Which was revolutionary.
It was. Almost all of them followed his example by composing works specifically for both violin and viola, basically treating them as equals.
And that institutional respect brings up a really fascinating, albeit heavily debated, piece of historical lore.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
The legend that Niccolò Paganini himself studied with Rolla.
Yes, this is a massive cornerstone of string mythology.
So what's the story there?
Well, the story goes that a young Paganini, when he was around 13 years old, traveled to Parma in the autumn of 1795 to study with Rolla.
Okay.
Now, musicologist Franco Sciannameo has heavily scrutinized this, and the primary sources are, well, they're murky.
So there's no proof?
There's no definitive proof of a formal enrollment, but it has never been entirely disproven either.
But I feel like whether it was a formal 6-month masterclass or just an informal mentorship where a teenage Paganini hung out in Rolla's orbit, the implications are just staggering.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you are a sponge like Paganini and you're surrounded by the Lombardy School, where the viola is actually revered...
It changes your fundamental DNA as a musician.
Right. It definitely planted the seeds for Paganini's later obsession with the instrument.
For sure. Rolla proved that the viola could be a vehicle for serious virtuosity.
But it was a very Italian, very structured, academic kind of virtuosity, wasn't it?
It was, and to see the viola pushed into the realm of the theatrical and the spiritual, we have to leave Milan.
And look at what was happening simultaneously in Paris.
Exactly.
Which is the perfect thematic pivot, because if Alessandro Rolla was the academic bureaucrat building the institutional foundation for the viola, our next figure was the absolute polar opposite.
Chrétien Urhan.
Right, he was a self-taught mystic.
He was. He approached the viol not as a syllabus to be mastered, but it's a medium for this deep spiritual intensity.
So let's talk about Urhan, because he is one of the most wonderfully complex figures in 19th century music.
He really is. So he was born on February 16, 1790 at Montreuil, which is near Aachen, and he died in Paris in 1845.
Okay, got the dates.
And the level of natural talent we were talking about with Urhan is almost frightening.
He was a child prodigy, right?
Oh, majorly. His father gave him some basic violin lessons, and he was performing in public by age 5.
5. And he didn't even wait for a teacher for anything else either.
No.
The sources note he taught himself how to play the horn, the trumpet, the flute, the guitar, and the piano.
All self-taught.
And he was writing piano valses and theme and variations before his 10th birthday.
He was just an absolute sponge for music. And that raw talent caught the ear of Empress Josephine.
Napoleon's wife.
Yes. She was so captivated by the teenage Urhan that she essentially sponsored his move to Paris.
That is some serious backing.
It is. She introduced him to Jean-François Lesueur, who was the music director of the Emperor's Royal Chapelle.
That is the ultimate networking connection in Paris at the time.
Oh, definitely. Lesueur basically takes him under his wing, treats him like a son, and starts grooming him to be a composer.
Right, because Lesueur prepares Urhan to enter the Prix de Rome.
Yes.
But I think we need to explain what that actually means to our listeners, because it wasn't just a shiny trophy you put on a shelf.
Oh, no, not at all. The Prix de Rome was the most prestigious state-sponsored prize in France.
Right.
Winning it meant receiving a multi-year government stipend to live and study at the French Academy in Rome.
It was essentially the guaranteed fast track to a major career in composition.
Exactly. Berlioz, Debussy, Bizet, they all won it eventually, and Lesueur was absolutely certain Urhan would win.
But then geopolitics slammed the door shut.
Yes, the fall of Napoleon in 1814.
Right, the Allies enter Paris, and suddenly the political climate shifts overnight.
And here's the problem. Urhan was technically a Prussian citizen because he was born in Montjoy.
Ah.
So in the nationalist fervor following the Allied occupation, Prussian citizens were strictly barred from competing in the Prix de Rome.
Man, that is just a devastating sliding doors moment.
Truly.
You are groomed for the ultimate prize, and you are disqualified because of the town you happen to be born in.
But, for the history of the viola, it is the greatest thing that could have happened.
Because he is shut out of top-tier composition, so he throws all of that obsessive polymath energy purely into performance.
Exactly. And he immediately associates with the elite. In 1814, he joins Pierre Baillot's famous string quartet and quintet playing the viola.
Right.
And then he joins the Paris Opera Orchestra in 1816, working his way up to concertmaster by 1825.
Okay, but this is where Urhan's intense personal eccentricity really begins to bleed into his musical life.
Oh, we have to talk about his setup in the opera orchestra pit.
Yes, because the source text mentions a condition he demanded that is so hilarious, yet so revealing.
It really is.
So, listeners, you have to picture the Paris Opera at this time. It is the height of visual spectacle. Massive sets, ballets, super dramatic singers.
Right.
And Urhan, the concertmaster, insists that his chair be turned around so he is playing with his back to the stage.
Yes, he just faced the audience, faced away from the stage,
Right.
because he was an intensely devoted religious mystic.
Right.
He played the organ at the Saint-Vincent de Paul Church, and he firmly believed that the action on the stage, the dancers, the dramatic plots, the costume, all of it was quote-unquote wicked and non-Christian.
So he just refused to look at it.
He simply refused.
It is the equivalent of a modern Broadway pit musician wearing a blindfold for 3 hours every night just because they morally object to the script.
That's a perfect comparison.
But beyond just being a really funny historical anecdote, how did that physical posture affect the music?
That's the interesting part.
Because if you are a violinist or violist sitting in a pit and you turn your chair 180 degrees, your F-holes are no longer pointing out toward the house.
Right, they are pointing back into the pit or at the maestro.
Exactly. So acoustically, he is significantly altering his projection.
He is. But psychologically, think about the level of internal focus that requires
to not watch the stage.
Yeah. He is deliberately shutting out the visual stimuli of the performance. He's not watching the dancers leap to time a musical hit.
Wow, so he has to just feel it.
Yes. He is forced to channel all of that theatrical energy purely into the sound itself. He is totally internalizing the drama.
That's fascinating, and it creates a playing style that composers in Paris realized was completely unique to him.
He had an intensity and a versatility that literally nobody else possessed at the time.
Which led to him single-handedly reviving an instrument that had been basically dead for 50 years.
The viola d'amour.
Right. So for our Viola Studio audience who maybe haven't spent time in a Baroque ensemble, what exactly is the viola d'amour?
It's a fascinating piece of acoustic engineering. It is a bowed string instrument, roughly the size of a standard viola, and you play it under the chin.
Okay.
But underneath the main gut strings that you actually bow, there is a second set of wire strings that run under the fingerboard and the bridge.
And you don't bow those?
No, you never touch them.
No.
They operate purely on sympathetic resonance.
Right. So if I play an A on the bowed string, the physical sound wave travels through the bridge, vibrates the top plate of the instrument.
And that forces the hidden wire A string to start ringing on its own.
It's the physics of Helmholtz resonance.
Exactly. It creates this wash of overtones.
Yeah.
It basically sounds like the instrument has a built-in reverb pedal.
That's a great way to describe it.
Yeah, it has a very sweet, silvery, ethereal tone.
But there's a catch, right?
Oh, huge catch. It is notoriously difficult to keep in tune. All those sympathetic strings react to humidity and temperature.
So by the 19th century, it was considered completely obsolete.
Pretty much dead.
Yeah.
But Urhan played it with such spiritual intensity that composers actually started writing specifically for him to use it in major operas.
Which is a huge testament to his skill.
Definitely. I mean, Jean-Madeleine Schneitzofer wrote a brilliant solo for the viola d'amour in the ballet to the opera Zemire et Azur in 1821.
And Rudolf Kreutzer did too, right? The guy Beethoven dedicated the sonata to.
Yes, Kreutzer wrote a solo for it in Le Paradis de Mohammed in 1822.
Okay.
And then Giacomo Meyerbeer, in his massive 1836 grand opera Les Huguenots, featured Urhan heavily.
I remember reading that in one of the protagonist's key areas, the solo viola is given the primary accompaniment, and Urhan actually switched between the standard viola and the viola d'amour for different sections.
He did. It was a total show stealer. In fact, Hector Berlioz, who was an incredibly harsh critic of string playing, by the way, wrote in his Grand Traité d'Instrumentation that Urhan was literally the only artist in all of Paris who could play the viola d'amore.
The only one. That's wild, but Urhan didn't even stop there. He was also performing on experimental instruments like the violin alto.
Yes.
I want to dig into this for a second. What exactly is a violin alto, and why would someone play it?
Well, it was invented by Michel Woldemar, who was a violinist from Orléans. Mechanically speaking, it was essentially a 5-string violin.
Okay.
He took a standard violin body and added a low C string to it.
Which sounds great in theory, you know. You get the high range of the violin and the low range of the viola.
Right, the best of both worlds.
But acoustically, if you put a thick, heavy C string on a small violin body, you just don't have the air volume inside the box to support that low frequency.
No, you don't.
So the C string must have sounded incredibly weak and nasal compared to a true viola.
It definitely was an acoustic compromise, undoubtedly. But Woldemar composed a concerto in C major specifically for it.
And Urhan played it.
Of course he did. Being the chameleon he was, he performed it successfully.
Man.
And it really highlights a massive trend in the 19th century.
Which was?
The exceptional viola player was expected to be a utility player.
Because you couldn't just be a standard violist.
No, because the standard viola was still considered a lesser instrument by the public.
Yeah.
To get respect, you had to prove you were this multi-instrumental polymath.
Just look at Urhan's gig schedule.
Insane.
He's playing quartets with Bayreuth. He's the concertmaster of the opera, sitting backwards. He's a church organist. He's reviving the viola d'amore. And he's playing experimental 5-string violins.
It is exhausting, just to list out loud.
It really is. But that sheer unquestionable competence is exactly why, when a certain deeply controversial, ego-driven virtuoso needed a premiere for a piece he found, quote-unquote, too easy, Urhan was the man who got the call.
Yeah.
This is the perfect pivot, because from the spiritual, inward-focused restraint of Chrétien Urhan, we swing the pendulum to the absolute opposite extreme.
We really do.
We go to a man who wanted the viola not to serve God, but to serve his own superhuman ego and massive physical proportions.
Enter Niccolò Paganini.
Paganini. 1782 to 1840. We associate him almost exclusively with the violin, right? The demonic showman, the pyrotechnics.
Right, the guy who supposedly sold his soul to the devil to play so fast.
Exactly. But what Riley's research in Chapter 11 reveals is that between 1833 and 1834, at the absolute zenith of his international fame, Paganini seriously contemplated giving up the violin entirely.
Just dropping it.
Yep. To concertize exclusively on the viola.
Which is a staggering historical what-if.
It really is. The most famous violinist in human history wanting to drop the instrument to play the viola. Why did he want to do that?
Well, it comes down to biomechanics.
Okay.
Paganini's physical stature is very well documented.
Yeah.
He had exceptionally long arms, and his fingers were incredibly long and flexible.
Some people think he had a connective tissue disorder, right? Like Marfan syndrome.
Yes, that's a very common medical theory.
Because for the violists listening to this, you know exactly what we're talking about. When you are stuck in first position and you have to reach an extended fourth finger on the C string while keeping your first finger anchored on the A string.
The tension in the web of your hand is excruciating.
It really hurts. But Paganini simply didn't have that problem.
No, his hand was built for a much larger fingerboard. He actually found the violin almost too small for his hand frame.
Interesting.
Yeah, and his fascination with the viola likely solidified during his frequent trips to Paris.
Where he spent a lot of time in the atelier of the legendary luthier Jean-Baptiste Vuillaume.
Exactly. Vuillaume is the guy who famously repaired Paganini's 1742 Canigornerie del Gesù violin.
Oh, right.
And while Paganini was hanging out in the shop, he likely witnessed Vuillaume's ongoing obsession with designing a scientifically perfect viola.
Which was what exactly?
An instrument that could produce a massive, even sound across all 4 strings without muting the low C string.
Which is basically the holy grail of lutherie.
Yes.
Like, how do we make a wooden box big enough to resonate 130 hertz, which is the frequency of the open C string, without making the box so long that a human arm can't physically reach the end of it?
Right, it's a huge design problem. But Paganini decides he doesn't need to compromise on the design because his arms are longer than anyone else's.
He can handle a bigger box.
Exactly. So in February 1833, he writes a letter to his closest confidant, Luigi Guglielmo Germi.
Germi was a lawyer and amateur violinist back in Genoa, right?
Yes. And Paganini asks him, quote, "If I should need your big viola to play in London, would you send it to me? I shall call this instrument the Contralto."
The contralto. It's a brilliant marketing term, honestly.
It really is. It immediately implies a depth and power far beyond a standard alto instrument.
Now, we don't have the exact measurements of this quote-unquote German viola written down in the primary source.
No, we don't.
But we do have an incredible first-hand eyewitness account of just how massive it was.
Yes, we do. In 1874, an English violinist named Charles Severn wrote a letter recalling a concert 40 years prior.
Okay.
Severn had actually played from the very same double desk as Paganini during a rehearsal in London.
That's amazing.
And Severn noted that Paganini's viola was so large that in order to reach the first position, Paganini's arm was stretched out quite straight.
Okay, let's break down the anatomy of that for our Viola Studio audience.
Yeah, let's look at the physics.
Because if you are holding a standard 16-inch viola, your left elbow is bent at a comfortable angle.
Right.
It allows you to pivot your forearm, it allows your bicep to support the weight of the neck, and it allows your wrist to drop back naturally for vibrato.
But if your arm is stretched out quite straight...
It lose all of that leverage. The strain on the deltoid and the rotator cuff, just to keep the instrument parallel to the floor, is immense.
It's a recipe for an injury.
Oh, absolutely.
And Riley actually hypothesizes, based on Paganini's known arm length and Severn's description, that this viola had to have a body length of at least 45.7 centimeters.
Which is 18 inches.
18 inches.
Just to contextualize that, for non-players, a 17-inch viola today is considered gigantic.
Oh yeah, 17 is huge.
It is a known cause of career-ending shoulder injuries. So an 18-inch viola is functionally a fractional cello that you are violently forcing into your neck.
It is biomechanically absurd. But acoustically.
It's the dream.
It is. The sheer volume of air inside an 18-inch resonating chamber means the lower overtones of the C and G strings are fully supported.
The sound would have been cavernous.
Just massive. So Paganini decides to brute force the laws of physics. He composes a piece specifically to show off this absolute monster.
The Sonnet per la Grande Viola e Orchestra in C, Opus 35.
Written in early 1834. It features an introduzione, recitative, cantabile e tema con variazione.
And he brings it to London, makes his grand debut as a violist at the Hanover Square Rooms on April 28, 1834.
And this is where the physical reality of the instrument finally catches up with him.
The reviews, right?
Yeah, the London Times reviewed the concert, and their assessment was incredibly telling.
What did they say?
They wrote, quote, "Some of the passages on the lower strings had an exceedingly rich and mellow effect."
Which makes sense. He's playing an 18-inch box. The C string probably sounded like a cannon going off in the hall.
But the review goes on.
Yeah.
But the upper notes were not so clear and flexible, nor were the very rapid divisions, through the greater extension of fingers, so completely under his command as on the violin.
Wait, I want to push back on this, or at least ask for clarification.
Sure.
If we establish that Paganini had massive hands and super long fingers, why would a wider fingerboard slow him down? Couldn't he just reach the notes easily?
Well, he could reach them, yes, but reaching is not the same as speed and agility.
Okay, unpack that.
When you scale an instrument up to 18 inches, literally everything changes. The strings themselves are longer and they are thicker.
Right.
Which means they require more physical force to depress against the fingerboard.
Huh.
Plus, the string action, the actual distance from the string to the wood, is often higher on bigger instruments.
So every single time he drops a finger for a rapid trill or a fast variation, he has to travel further and push harder.
Exactly. Plus, the physical distance between the notes on the fingerboard, the half steps and whole steps, is significantly wider.
Ah, right, because the string length is longer.
Yeah. So when you are playing 30-second notes at presto tempo, those extra millimeters of travel time between each finger placement start to compound.
It creates a physical ceiling on sheer velocity.
Exactly. The Times essentially pointed out that while the tone was huge, the demonic speed that made Paganini famous was physically impossible on a box that big.
He was like a Formula One driver trying to win a Grand Prix in a dump truck.
That's exactly it.
You have insane, roaring horsepower on the straightaways, but you cannot corner. When he needed to execute those rapid-fire variations, the sheer mass of the instrument fought back.
It really proves that not even Niccolò Paganini can entirely defeat acoustic physics.
He couldn't, but, you know, his obsession with the viola didn't end there.
No, it didn't.
And his next move generated what is arguably the most important piece of 19th century viola literature.
Oh, absolutely. So during his 1833 tour, Paganini had purchased a genuine 1731 Stradivari viola from an English dealer in London named John Coresby.
A Stradivari viola. I mean, there are only about 10 of those confirmed to exist in the world today. It is the holy grail of instruments.
It is. So Paganini now had the perfect instrument, but he felt he had no repertoire worthy of his status to play on it.
Because he wasn't going to play someone else's basic concerto.
Right. But later that year, in December 1833, he attended a concert in Paris and heard a performance of Hector Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique.
And Paganini was completely blown away by Berlioz's orchestration.
He was, so he walks right up to Berlioz and essentially says, I have this incredible Stradivari viola. I want to play it in public, but I need music. Write me a solo.
Which for Berlioz, who was still pretty young and struggling for mainstream acceptance, this is the commission of a lifetime.
Oh yeah, the most famous instrumentalist on earth wants you to write a vehicle for him.
So Berlioz agrees and starts composing Harold en Italie.
But this is where the massive clash of egos happens.
Because Paganini wants a traditional pyrotechnic concerto where he is the undisputed star, playing constantly.
Right. But Berlioz, however, is a dramatist. He writes a symphony with the viola obbligato.
Which is very different.
Very. Berlioz approached the viola not as a virtuosic firework display, but as a philosophical character.
Right. The viola represents Harold, a melancholic wanderer observing the scenes of Italy.
Exactly. The viola part is incredibly beautiful, utilizing a recurring idée fixe, but it is heavily integrated into the orchestra.
It spends long periods resting, simply observing the musical landscape around it.
Yes. So Paganini sees the first movement draft and rejects it outright.
He famously looks at all the rest and says, I must be playing all the time.
It was a fundamental disagreement on the aesthetic purpose of the instrument.
So Paganini just walks away.
He does. But Berlioz believes in the score. He finishes it, and he needs someone to premiere it.
And who does he turn to?
Our Parisian chameleon, Chrétien Urhan.
Yes, Urhan, who is completely comfortable channeling deep, internalized emotion rather than flashy ego.
He was the perfect fit for the melancholic character of Harold.
So he premiered Harold en Italie on November 23, 1834.
And he absolutely crushed it. The Paris press went wild.
They started calling Urhan the Paganini of the viola, right? And the Byron of the orchestra, linking him to the moody romanticism of Lord Byron.
Yes. Berlioz is so thrilled he wrote a letter to Urhan saying, quote, you performed a great impersonation of him, meaning Paganini, at this occasion.
It was a massive triumph for the viola as an instrument of serious dramatic weight.
It really was.
And what about Paganini?
Well, he eventually heard the piece 4 years later in 1838.
Okay.
And he was so moved by the performance and perhaps realized his own foolishness in rejecting it that he dragged Berlioz onto the stage, knelt, and kissed his hand.
Wow.
And a few days later sent Berlioz a letter containing a bank draft for 20,000 francs.
Which was an absolute fortune that saved Berlioz from financial ruin at the time.
It did. But the tragedy here is that Paganini's own dream of the giant contralto died with him.
Right. His health deteriorated rapidly due to syphilis and tuberculosis.
He amassed a massive collection of instruments, though. He left his 1612 Amati viola with his banker in Milan and eventually owned 3 Stradivari violas.
But he never actually systemized his approach to the giant viola?
No, it was just a personal, physical freak show, essentially.
Until we get to the late 19th century.
Yes.
Because the acoustic logic behind Paganini's 18-inch experiment was completely sound.
The physics were correct, even if the biomechanics were flawed.
And it took a German scholar, armed with actual acoustic science and backed by the most powerful composer in the world, to finally systemize the behemoth viola.
Which brings us to our fourth and final pioneer.
The man who turned the giant viola from a personal quirk into a mandatory cult.
Hermann Ritter.
Hermann Ritter. So Ritter was born in 1849 in Wismar and died in 1926 in Würzburg.
Right.
And if Urhan was the mystic and Paganini was the physical extremist, Ritter was the true Renaissance man.
He really was. He studied violin, music theory, and music history at the Neue Akademie der Tonkunst in Berlin.
But he was also a deeply intellectual academic, studying philosophy, art history, and archaeology at the University of Heidelberg.
So he wasn't just a guy who moved his fingers fast, you know. He was a thinker trying to solve a systemic problem.
And his obsession with the viola stemmed from a very specific, very angry piece of writing by Richard Wagner, didn't it?
It did. Wagner's 1869 monograph, Über das Dirigieren, or On Conducting.
Oh, man, Wagner did not hold back in that essay.
He really didn't.
If you want to know the brutal truth of what composers actually thought of the viola sections we talked about in the intro, you just have to listen to Wagner.
Yeah, he wrote regarding German orchestras, quote, The viola is commonly, with rare exceptions indeed, played by infirm violinists or by decrepit players of wind instruments who happen to have been acquainted with a stringed instrument once upon a time.
That is a devastating critique of a professional ensemble.
It is.
And he goes further. Wagner complains that he was conducting a massive orchestra with 8 violas in the section, and out of those 8, only one player could actually handle the difficult passages in his newer scores.
Yeah. Wagner identified that the root cause was historical instrumentation.
Right.
In older Italian operas, the viola just chugged along, playing the bass line an octave higher, or filled in boring harmonic middle voices.
Because the parts were easy, the players never had to develop serious technique.
Exactly. And as a result, the entire culture of the section decayed.
So Ritter reads this essay and realizes the problem is twofold.
Yes. First, the players lack technical standards.
Right.
Second, the physical instruments they are playing are way too small.
Because if you have 8 guys playing dinky 15-inch violas, they are never going to generate the sheer sonic mass required to cut through Wagner's heavy, brass-dominated orchestration.
Never. So Ritter turns to science. He studies the rules of acoustics laid out by physicists like Antonio Bagatella. He calculates the exact proportional relationship required to make the C string resonate with the same clarity and power as the G string on a violin.
And his resulting blueprint is what he calls the Viola Alta.
Yes.
And he did not compromise on the math at all. He designed an instrument with a body length of 48 centimeters.
18.9 inches.
That is almost an inch larger than Paganini's monstrous Contralto.
It's massive.
So Ritter takes his schematics to a highly respected luthier in Würzburg named Karl Herrlein and commissions him to build it.
And Herrlein finishes the instrument, and Ritter is completely satisfied. The tone is massive, completely devoid of that nasal, constrained quality of smaller violas.
But Ritter knows he needs a major endorsement to make this legitimate.
Right. So in a move of sheer audacity, he takes the 18.9-inch viola directly to Munich to demonstrate it for Richard Wagner himself.
Just put yourself in that room for a second.
Yeah.
You walk in to meet the most notoriously demanding, egotistical composer of the 19th century. You pull out a viola the size of a coffee table, play it for him, and say, hey, I solved the problem you complained about in your essay.
It was a massive gamble, but Wagner was absolutely astonished.
He loved it.
He did. The sound of the Viola Alta perfectly matched his aesthetic vision for a dark, powerful, resonant middle voice in his orchestra.
So much so that Wagner hired Ritter on the spot.
Yes, to play principal viola for the most important musical event of the decade.
The Bayreuth Triumph.
Exactly. The 1876 premiere of the complete Der Ring des Nibelungen at the brand new, custom-built Wagner Theater.
August 13th through the 17th.
You have Hans Richter conducting, the legendary August Wilhelm leading the violins as concertmaster, and Hermann Ritter sitting principal viola, just dominating the section with his huge Herrlein Viola Alta.
It was the ultimate proof of concept. The instrument performed flawlessly in the acoustic environment of the Bayreuth pit.
It did. And suddenly Ritter was mingling with the absolute elite of European music.
Like Anton Rubinstein and Hans von Bülow.
Yes. Franz Liszt was actually so enchanted by the tone of the Viola Alta that he later composed the Romance oubliée for viola and piano and dedicated it specifically to Ritter.
That is incredible validation. So Ritter takes this momentum and hits the road.
He goes on a massive solo concert tour across Germany, Switzerland, Holland, and Russia for 3 years.
But interestingly, the sources say he gets frustrated by the poor taste of the general audiences.
Right. He decides that the only way to truly elevate the viola is through institutional pedagogy.
So he becomes a professor at the Royal School of Music in Würzburg.
And this is where Ritter really becomes the godfather of modern viola pride.
Right.
He doesn't just teach. He generates a staggering amount of pedagogical literature. Between 1883 and 1907, the publisher Kistner and Siegel released volumes of Ritter's edits, transcriptions, and original compositions.
Because he felt the existing literature wasn't worthy of his new, powerful instrument.
Exactly. He wrote original works like Im Träumen for viola alta and piano, Opus 32, No. 2.
And a massive concert fantasy for viola alta and orchestra in Kamal, Opus 5, both published in 1886.
He was completely indoctrinating his students into the cult of the viola alta. He demanded they play these massive instruments.
And he produced exceptional players, too. Guys like Clemens Meyer, Michael Balling, and Paul Louis Neuberth.
Yeah, Herrlein's workshop was churning out these 48-centimeter violas as fast as they could just to meet the demand of Ritter's students.
But Physics always collects its toll eventually,
Always.
because the source material notes that despite all of Ritter's fame and Wagner's backing, the popularity of the viola alta among the general professional population was pretty short-lived.
It was.
Because, shocker, an 18.9-inch viola is violently incompatible with the human skeleton.
It really was. The issue wasn't just the length, though. It was the width of the upper bout, the shoulders of the instrument body.
Right, explain that for us.
Well, on an 18.9-inch viola, the upper bout is so wide that when a player tries to shift their left hand into higher positions, basically anything past third position, their hand physically collides with the wood.
You literally cannot get your thumb around the neck block to anchor your hand.
No, you can't.
You have to execute these massive, risky jumps entirely unsupported while your left arm is already fully extended just to hold the thing up.
It resulted in severe physical strain for his students. So, in 1898, realizing that his disciples were struggling to play repertoire that required the higher register of the A string, Ritter comes up with a mechanical solution.
Which is just crazy. He adds a fifth string.
Yes. He adds a high violin E string to the top.
So by tuning the instrument C, G, D, A, E, the player could access the high-soaring melodies without ever needing to shift past third position over that massive upper bout.
That was the idea, yes.
But I need you to explain the acoustic reality of this, because to me, this sounds like an absolute paradox.
It is a bit of a paradox, yeah. Ritter designs a massive viola specifically to enhance the dark, cavernous resonance of the low C string. But then he adds a high, screaming violin E string. Doesn't that just turn the instrument into a low-tuned, oversized violin?
That is the exact debate, and it is the crux of why the five-string viola alta ultimately failed.
Okay.
Think about it like adding a massive turbocharger to a heavy diesel engine.
All right.
Yes, you get the top-end speed, the high E string, without having to change gears or shift positions, but you fundamentally alter the weight and the handling of the vehicle.
Because of the downward tension on the bridge.
Yes.
If you add a fifth thick gut string, you're adding dozens of pounds of downward pressure onto the top plate of the instrument.
Precisely. That extra tension clamps down on the spruce top plate, heavily restricting its ability to vibrate freely.
Wow.
So the very thing Ritter wanted, the dark, booming, resonant C string, is suddenly muted and choked by the tension of the E string pressing down on the bridge.
You lose the true viola timbre. You do. But Ritter was so stubborn he refused to abandon his vision. In 1905, he actually founded the Ritter Quartet to showcase these massive proportions across the entire string family.
The instrumentation of this quartet is a fascinating footnote in acoustic history.
It really is. You have a traditional first violin played by W. Schulze-Priska.
Right.
Then Ritter himself plays the second violin parts, but he plays them on his five-string viola alta.
Which is wild visually. The second violin is suddenly larger than the actual viola.
Exactly, because the viola part was played by E. Conbly on an instrument Ritter called a viola tenor.
And the cello part was played by H. Niccolò on a viola bassa.
Yes. Ritter's goal was to perfectly match the acoustic brilliance of the first violin across all the lower registers by mathematically enlarging the three lower instruments.
And amazingly, the sources say it kind of worked in execution. The famous German conductor Felix Weingartner actually wrote 2 highly complimentary articles praising the incredibly unified, massive sound of the Ritter Quartet.
It was an acoustic triumph, even if it was an ergonomic dead end. Ritter dedicated his entire life to this.
He really did.
He was a musicologist, a pioneer, and his sheer academic force shaped generations of German string players. He demanded that the violist be viewed as a first-class artist and equal to the violinist, armed with an instrument that commanded respect.
Which brings us to the synthesis of this incredible century of evolution we've been unpacking.
It's been quite a journey.
We started in a dark age where the viola was an orchestral graveyard for the infirm.
Right.
Then Alessandro Rolla came along and used his bureaucratic and pedagogical power in Italy to give the instrument institutional respect.
Chrétien Urhan in Paris proved that the viola could handle immense spiritual intensity, theatrical versatility, and complex inner voicings.
Niccolò Paganini pushed the physical boundaries of the instrument to the breaking point, proving that the acoustic ideal was a massive resonating chamber.
And Hermann Ritter took Paganini's physical experiment and codified it with acoustic science. elevating the status of the player, even if he pushed the instrument past human ergonomics.
It is a stunning, violent, and beautiful evolution over just 100 years. The viola was dragged, kicking and screaming, into the modern era.
It really was.
I want to speak directly to the Viola Studio listeners tuning in today. Every single time you sit in a practice room and struggle with the sluggish response of your C string,
Or every time you feel that deep burning ache in your left shoulder and rotator cuff after a 3-hour rehearsal,
you are not alone. You are actively participating in a 200-year-old conversation.
you're feeling the exact same biomechanical struggle that Paganini and Ritter fought. The limit of the human body versus acoustic perfection.
It is the defining, inescapable reality of playing the instrument.
It is.
And it leaves us with a final provocative thought to mull over. Today, in the 21st century, we have miraculous advancements in string technology.
Oh, absolutely.
We have synthetic core strings wound with tungsten and silver that project massive focused sound, even when put on smaller, ergonomically comfortable 15.5-inch violas.
Right, which makes things so much easier on the body.
So the question you have to ask yourself is this. With this modern string technology, have we finally achieved Paganini and Ritter's dream of the roaring contralto sound without the physical pain? Or, by shrinking the wooden box and relying entirely on heavy metal string tension to do the work, have we secretly sacrificed the true, cavernous, moving air resonance of those 18.9-inch behemoths of the past?
Wow, it is a question every violist must answer for themselves every single time they put the bow to the string.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope this summary and analysis have been of great help to you. Please remember that this is only a summary and can never replace the book itself. Therefore, we invite you to truly immerse yourself in the work by reading the original text. If this content was useful to you, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell. Remember, you can share this video with your friends to help our community continue to grow. Warmest regards, and remember, there is always time to learn and explore the world of classical music. A Viola Studio production.